Welcome back to Peter Kai. And if you are new here, this is where we break down the most critical moments in modern conflict with total clarity. No fluff, no filler. Today's story has shaken the global energy market, rattled military command rooms from Washington to Tehran, and sent a cold wave of uncertainty through every shipping company, oil trader, and government on the planet that depends on the free movement of petroleum to keep its economy alive. This is not a story about a minor flare-up or political posturing. This is the story of how Iran chose to play its most powerful card, control over the Strait of Hormuz, and how that single calculated decision triggered one of the most brutal and deliberately terrifying military responses we have seen in this entire conflict. So settle in, because this one covers a lot of ground. Let me start with the foundation, because without understanding the geography and economics at play here, none of what follows will hit you with the full weight it deserves. The Strait of Hormuz. Say those three words to any energy economist, naval strategist, or geopolitical analyst, and you will see their expression change immediately. This is not just a body of water, this is the single most strategically important maritime choke point on Earth. It sits between the southern coast of Iran and the northern tip of Oman, connecting the Persian Gulf to the open ocean beyond. At its narrowest point, it is just 21 miles across. And yet, through that sliver of water, approximately 17 million barrels of crude oil pass every single day. Somewhere between 20 and 30% of the entire world's seaborne oil supply. Here is the number that makes everything click. 88% of all the oil that exits the Persian Gulf goes through the Strait of Hormuz. There is no real alternative. The pipelines are limited and nowhere near capable of absorbing the volume. If you want the oil that heats homes, fuels aircraft, and powers factories across Europe, Asia, and the Americas to reach its destination, it has to move through that strait. Iran sits right on top of it. And Iran has known for a very long time that this single geographic reality gives it leverage that no other piece of its military arsenal can match. Forbes magazine called Iran's control over the strait the country's real nuclear option. Not a metaphor, but a genuine strategic reality. You do not need a nuclear warhead to paralyze the global economy. You just need to make the world's most important oil corridor too dangerous to sail through. And it is even tighter than the 21-mile figure suggests. The Strait of Hormuz is divided into formal shipping lanes, one inbound, one outbound, each about 2 miles wide with a 2-mile buffer zone between them. So that 21-mile choke point narrows, in practical terms, to just 6 miles of usable corridor. 6 miles that Iran's fast patrol boats can prowl and its drone assets can strike at will. The March 11th attacks proved conclusively that Iran had both the will and the capability to do exactly that. So let us talk about what happened on March 11th. 3 merchant ships were attacked in and around the Strait of Hormuz, and each attack tells a story about the seriousness and deliberate logic of what Iran was doing. The first vessel struck was the Mayuri Nuri, a Thai-registered bulk carrier that had recently departed from a port in the United Arab Emirates. It was hit by what official reports called 2 projectiles of unknown origin. That phrase is worth pausing on for a moment. Unknown origin is the careful diplomatic language used when the culprit is obvious, but formal attribution carries legal and military implications that nobody wants to trigger in the moment. Everything about the strike, the location, the method, the timing, pointed directly at Iran. The Mayuri Nari was not just damaged, it was set on fire, left burning roughly 11 nautical miles north of Oman. The crew had no choice but to abandon ship. 20 crew members were evacuated by the Omani Navy, with 3 others staying behind as a skeleton crew while awaiting a follow-up rescue. Fortunately, no lives were lost, but a burning, abandoned bulk carrier in the approaches to the world's most important oil corridor was not just a maritime emergency. It was a message, delivered deliberately in full public view to every shipping company, insurer, and government on the planet. The Strait of Hormuz is no longer safe. And that message was not delivered only once. The attack on the Mayuri Nari was the opening strike in a coordinated sequence. The second vessel hit was the One Majesty, a Japanese container ship struck by a projectile while sailing roughly 45 kilometers northwest of Ras Al Khaimah in the UAE. It sustained only minor damage above the waterline, the least severely affected of the three ships hit that day, but the message was no less clear. Iran was not targeting a single vessel out of a specific grievance. It was targeting the entire waterway. The third ship hit was the Star Gwyneth, a bulk carrier flying the flag of the Marshall Islands, struck at anchor approximately 50 kilometers northwest of Dubai. Damage was caused to the hull in the ship's hold area, with no injuries reported. An anchored ship being hit demonstrated that Iran's targeting extended beyond vessels actively in transit. The reach was broad. The intent was comprehensive. 3 ships, 3 separate locations. 3 attacks, all in the same region, all on the same day. This was not chaos. This was a deliberate campaign. And it was not even the start of the broader campaign. These March 11th strikes were added to a list of at least 11 previous attacks that had already occurred in and around the Strait of Hormuz since the war between the US, Israel, and Iran escalated into open conflict. Iran had been building toward this moment, testing responses, probing defenses, and communicating intent through every strike. By March 11th, the regime's spokespeople had stopped being subtle about the goal. Iranian military spokesperson Ebrahim Zolfikari put it plainly. Get ready for oil to be $200 a barrel because the oil price depends on regional security, which you have destabilized. That was the mission. Force oil prices so high that the economic pain of continuing the war outweighs the cost of ending it. The strategy was already working to a degree at 1M1M9. Oil had already spiked as high as $120 a barrel before settling around $90 as markets absorbed tentative hopes of a resolution. But $90 was still significantly elevated, still squeezing household energy bills, still adding inflationary pressure to economies already under strain. Military analyst Max Afterburner added another layer. His analysis identified the clear fingerprint of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, in the nature of these attacks. The IRGC is not simply a branch of Iran's military. It is a parallel institution, deeply ideological, operating with a degree of independence and aggression that sometimes outpaces the formal command structure. And it had been absorbing relentless punishment from U.S. forces. The attacks on commercial shipping, in Afterburner's assessment, carried the unmistakable character of IRGC payback, a message that for every bomb dropped on Iranian soil, the world would feel it at the pump. Bloomberg's analyst framed Iran's Hormuz strategy around 2 possible winning scenarios. The first, the one both the US and Iran would privately prefer, is that the disruption creates enough pressure to force peace negotiations. No American president wants to own the closure of a waterway carrying 20% of the world's seaborne oil. The political and economic fallout would be enormous. The second scenario is grimmer, a prolonged disruption that eventually drives commercial shipping to abandon the strait entirely, rerouting around Africa at enormous additional cost. Either way, in Iran's calculation, the Strait of Hormuz delivers leverage that nothing else in its arsenal can. But here is what Iran failed to properly account for. The United States had seen this coming, had prepared its response, and was ready to execute with a speed and ferocity that left absolutely no room for doubt about what defiance would cost. On March 10th, one day before the triple strike, President Trump posted on Truth Social with a directness that left nothing to interpretation. He called Iran out specifically on mines. If Iran has put out any mines in the Hormuz Strait, and we have no reports of them doing so, we want them removed immediately. If for any reason mines were placed and they are not removed forthwith, the military consequences to Iran will be at a level never seen before. He even extended a hand. Pulling back from the strait would be a giant step in the right direction. A clear threat on one side, a clear offer on the other. Iran was given every opportunity to choose a different path. Iran did not take it. The consequences arrived with a speed that revealed just how prepared the U.S. had been. The United States destroyed 16 of Iran's mine-laying ships, along with several additional naval vessels, in rapid precision strikes confirmed by U.S. Central Command on March 11th. The timing detail that tells the whole story. Trump himself reported the first 10 ships destroyed just 13 minutes after his March 10th warning. The operation had been authorized and launched before the warning had even finished reverberating through the international news cycle. 6 more vessels were destroyed in the hours that followed. Trump announced it himself. I am pleased to report that within the last few hours, we have hit and completely destroyed 10 inactive mine-laying boats and/or ships, with more to follow. The word inactive matters. These ships had not yet deployed to seed the strait with mines, but inactive is not the same as harmless. They represented Iran's capacity to transform the Strait of Hormuz into a minefield at a moment's notice. Now that capacity is gone, Iran's mine strategy was dismantled before it fully materialized, but the U.S. did not stop at the mine layers, not even close. And just a quick note here, if you have been following Peter Kai for a while, you already know this channel does not do things halfway. If you are not subscribed yet, this is a genuinely good time to do that, because the pace of this conflict is only accelerating, and you will want to be here when the next chapter breaks. What followed was not just a targeted counterattack. It was a sweeping, sustained campaign of aerial destruction across Iran's military infrastructure at virtually every level. Afterburner documented that March 10th alone saw the U.S. launch strike waves against Iran on roughly an hourly basis. Different targets, different directions, wave after wave throughout the day and into the night. Among the most significant losses Iran suffered was the complete elimination of its last 4 Shahid Soleimani-class corvettes. An entire class of Iranian warships wiped out entirely. Not degraded, gone. The U.S. described its approach as intentionally unpredictable, dynamic, and decisive, and the results bore that out completely. Iran had no effective means of resisting. Its air defenses had been degraded. Its warships could not intercept. The strikes came from directions and at intervals that made any coherent defensive response impossible. The scale of Operation Epic Fury, launched in late February, is genuinely staggering. By the time the immediate response to March 11th's Strait of Hormuz attacks had been executed, the United States claimed to have struck more than 5,500 targets inside Iran since the operation began, with over 60 of those being Iranian warships. The number of actual munitions expended would be even higher. Hardened targets like underground bunkers require multiple hits before they are genuinely neutralized. Military analyst Preston Stewart raised the sustainability question that every operational planner eventually has to answer. 5,500 targets over the operation's duration works out to roughly 500 targets per day. As Stewart put it, those cannot all be done with standoff munitions. We do have a lot of Tomahawks. We do have a lot of ATACMS. We do have a lot of long-range cruise missiles. We don't have enough to be carrying out 500 attacks a day every day for the foreseeable future. The most credible explanation for how this pace is being sustained is that the U.S. has shifted heavily toward guided bombs delivered by aircraft from carriers and regional bases, munitions that can be produced and replenished at a scale that cruise missiles simply cannot match over an extended campaign. Now, here is the part that keeps every naval planner awake at night. Because even after all of that, 16 mine layers destroyed, an entire corvette class eliminated, 5,500 targets struck, the Strait of Hormuz was still not open for commercial shipping, and the reason comes down to the threat that has proven hardest to address: fast attack boats. Iran still has them, lots of them. And in the current phase of this conflict, they are the most operationally relevant weapon Iran still possesses for disrupting the strait. These are not the warships you target with a cruise missile from 1,000 miles away. They are small, fast, highly maneuverable in shallow, constrained waters. They operate in swarms. They can close on a target, launch a drone, a rocket, or an explosive charge, and scatter before any coordinated response arrives. Some do not even need crews. Iran has remotely controlled vessels packed with explosives, essentially maritime suicide drones, that carry striking parallels to the seaborne drones Ukraine has used so devastatingly against Russia's Black Sea fleet. The threat these fast boats represent became painfully concrete on March 12th, just 24 hours after the triple strike. Two more ships, the Safe Sea Vishnu and the Zephyros, both flagged to the Marshall Islands, were struck at around 1:30 in the morning off the coast of Iraq. Both caught fire. 38 crew members were rescued. But this time, the news was not entirely survivable. One person died. The first confirmed fatality in Iran's campaign against commercial shipping in and around the Strait of Hormuz. A line had been crossed. The U.S. now faces the most tactically difficult phase of the campaign. The pieces of Iran's naval capability that were easiest to find and destroy have been destroyed. What remains is a dispersed, mobile, asymmetric threat requiring a fundamentally different approach. Afterburner's prescription involves air power. With the mainland bombing campaign now operating primarily through aerial delivery of guided munitions, a portion of that fighter capacity can be redeployed to establish a continuous combat air patrol above the strait. F-22s, F-18s, F-35s, F-16s. The idea is to maintain as many combat aircraft over the strait as possible on rotating sorties, ready to engage any fast boat or drone the moment it shows itself. An F-16 over Dubai has already demonstrated this works, destroying Shahed drones in exactly the kind of quick reaction engagement this approach depends on. With commercial tankers receiving fighter escort through the danger zone, Iran's ability to operate its fast boats with impunity would be substantially reduced. The cost asymmetry is the uncomfortable complication. Iran's Shahed drones cost tens of thousands of dollars each. American air defense munitions cost orders of magnitude more to intercept them. Every exchange favors Iran financially, even as the strategic outcome favors the U.S. It is a constraint that shapes the operational calculus in ways nobody can fully ignore. But the United States will not be carrying this burden alone much longer. France has announced plans to deploy what President Emmanuel Macron described as an unprecedented naval force to the region: the Strait of Hormuz, the Red Sea, and the Mediterranean. The deployment includes 2 helicopter carriers, 8 frigates, and the Charles de Gaulle, France's nuclear-powered flagship aircraft carrier. The Charles de Gaulle brings its own air wing, its own electronic warfare capabilities, and its own organic strike potential. Alongside American assets and other allied contributions, its arrival fundamentally changes what is achievable in the Strait. With a full multinational naval presence in position, escort missions become viable. Warships physically accompanying commercial tankers through the danger zone. Layered electronic warfare can jam Iran's drone guidance. Surface combatants can engage fast attack boats at range. The combined sensor network of a multinational task force is far harder for Iran to evade than any single nation deployment. It will not be a perfect shield. Nothing in warfare ever is. But it dismantles the last meaningful lever Iran has over the global economy. And as allied naval forces assume the Strait security mission, the United States can stay focused on what it has been most effective at: relentless aerial pressure on Iran's military and command infrastructure on the mainland. Hundreds of strikes per day, continuous degradation, systematic destruction of everything that keeps the Iranian regime's warfighting capacity functional. The objective is clear: apply enough sustained pressure that the regime collapses or seeks terms that permanently end its ability to threaten the Strait. If that collapse comes, and credible analysts believe it is a real possibility given the trajectory of this campaign, the ripple effects will reach well beyond Tehran. There is a man in Moscow watching all of this with deep personal concern, whose entire Middle East strategy depends on Iran remaining operational and reliable. Vladimir Putin. The fall of the Iranian regime would be a devastating blow to his regional ambitions. But that story belongs to another episode. What we know right now is this: Iran played the Hormuz card, the card Forbes called its real nuclear option. And the world, led by the United States and backed by France and other allies, did not fold. The U.S. hit back immediately, dismantled Iran's mine-laying capacity, wiped out entire classes of warships, and made clear that every attack on commercial shipping will be met with disproportionate and sustained force. The fast attack boat threat remains real. The Strait remains dangerous. One person has died. Oil prices are still elevated. The war continues. Iran's options are shrinking, but they are not yet gone. Before I wrap this up, I have two questions for you, and I genuinely want to know your thoughts. First, do you believe Iran's fast attack boat strategy can realistically keep the Strait of Hormuz dangerous enough to matter, even as U.S. and French naval forces build up in the region? Second, if Operation Epic Fury does bring about the collapse of the Iranian regime, who fills that power vacuum? And does the world that comes after end up more stable or less? Drop your answers in the comments. I read them, I reply when I can, and some of the sharpest thinking I have encountered on these issues has come directly from this community. And if this breakdown gave you something, if it helped you understand what is happening in the Strait of Hormuz at a depth the headlines do not reach, then the best thing you can do for this channel is subscribe. Not as an obligation, but because this story is not over, and the next chapter is going to be just as consequential. When it breaks, I want you to be here for it. This is Peter Kai. Stay sharp, stay informed, and I will see you in the next one.